engage. All right. So here we are on the 12th part of our study of the first chapter of Yechezeqel. This 15th verse is just by itself our final conclusion. Kind of makes sense, but it kind of doesn't make sense. And it was I don't know what was going on with me today, but I started out early working on it. Well, I started out last night working on it, and then this morning I worked on it, and I got to a point where I was just staring at it and then realized that I was really, really sleepy. So I went to bed, and this was, I guess it was around noon, because I just couldn't keep my eyes open. And I woke up at 3, and then it was time to go do this and do that. But when I woke up, I realized what it all entails and what everything that this verse is going to tell us about is found throughout the Scripture. So we have to take a journey through the Scripture. But those verses are numerous, and the study would be really vast. So we're going to talk about the verse, and then at the end, I've just listed out the Scriptures, and we'll just briefly talk about those Scriptures up here, and you can write the little chart thingy down if you want. I left plenty of space between on the last page, so let's talk to our Elohim, and then we'll get started on this verse. Master Yahuwah, we thank you for this time together. We thank you for your word. We thank you for the things that we're learning. We ask now that you'll open our eyes, open our ears, and open our hearts so that we can see and understand that there's more than simply saying that you prevail in our lives, that there's also gratitude and praise that has to come into that. And we thank you for this, and we thank you for it all in the name of Yahshua. Amen. All right. So, this following verse is a doorway to understanding, or the understanding of Scripture from Bereshit through the kingdom under King David's rule. Then takes us to the diaspora, and then it takes us back to Yechezeqel chapter 4. Now, the scope of these scriptures is large and beyond what we could cover in this single study, which is kind of what we just talked about. So I'm going to try to touch on these various scriptures outside of the notes, because they're both, these scriptures that we're going to talk about after we finish with this little verse thing, are important for us to grasp, that because they affect perception and choice. They also serve to further illustrate what ish without isha, and vice versa, that this is not enough, and that simply saying that Elohim prevails is not enough. We're going to discuss the need of praise and gratitude, as well as how our choice in Shin, that is our point of view or Elohim's point of view, affects everything as a whole. Now, our little verse simply says, "Now as I beheld the living creatures, behold, one wheel at the bottom hard by the living creatures at the 4 faces thereof." Okay, so that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Then if we read it in context with the other verses, it still doesn't make a lot of sense. In fact, nothing in this first chapter of Yechezeqel really makes a lot of sense. If we just simply read it, we try to construct a flying saucer or something. So let's take a look at this. The verse begins with the word vo'ere, meaning now as I beheld, and that's how it's transliterated in this. It's transliterated as now as I beheld. Literally, it would say now as beheld, which might suggest a meaning of what has been seen up to this point. So we say now as beheld, according to what we've seen, according to what we have put together to this point. So the root of this word is ra'ah, that means to see, to perceive, to consider, to learn about, to observe, and to distinguish. It also means to regard and to respect. So in this, in its simplest form, we are being instructed to do these things and regard and respect what we have considered up to this point. So at this point in this lesson, if you're looking at this at home and going over it, take out one of the lessons that has all the stuff that we've considered. I think a couple of lessons ago we had 2 pages of everything that we've considered, and look that over to understand what we have seen and how that applies to how we regard and respect our life. So the next word is Chayot, that means the life or the living. Again, the word for creatures isn't really found anywhere in the Hebrew of this verse. Chayot simply means the life or the living. We can formulate an idea now that would tell us that everything that we have seen, perceived, considered, learned about, observed, and distinguished to this point is given for us to regard and to respect life. Now, if we go back and look at all the stuff that we have compiled, we're going to see that this is exactly a true statement, that all this stuff helps us to understand our life, how to regard our life, how to respect our life, and how to actually help others to also find their way and teach others to respect their life as well. So it's telling us to pay attention to what we've learned because this applies to where we're going. And this brings us to the word vehine, that means and behold or and pay attention. So if we consider the vav as that means and to represent the human being, then we can again consider that it is us that is to pay attention. Now, if we consider the Proto-Hebrew of hine, we see this little seed sprouting a root, and we also see a person with their hands up in the air. And this idea is of looking towards something greater than we are continuously. All right? So what are we to pay attention after we've considered everything else? The next word is echad, that means one, but also means to be in union with. Now, again, we look at the Proto-Hebrew of this. It shows us the word dad, or chad, that we see the door in the wall. So a door is something that unites the outside with the inside. It's in the middle. I mean, it unites this room with that room. Or the front door unites what's inside with the outside, or the outside with the inside. We have to have a door to come out from outside of our relationship with Elohim. We have to go to the door to come into a relationship with Elohim inside the garden. So there has to be a way in. So let's see. The next word is the word everybody's been waiting for, ofan, that means wheel. It comes from a root that means to revolve, but this doesn't shed a whole lot of light on what it is that we are to behold. Ofan, it's interesting, ofan comes from a root, paneh, which means face, means presence. And in this Proto-Hebrew, we see this again, that we see the little seed with the root sprouting off of it, and then the picture of the mouth. In this we have a meaning that means the turning of the face or the continuance of the presence. So in this we can consider a choice. We can turn away from, or we can continue in the presence. So we all say, okay, the presence of what? We construct an idea. If everything that we've seen, perceived, considered, learned about, observed, and distinguished to this point is given for us to regard and respect life, then we have to pay attention towards something greater than us continuously to come into union with the door in the wall, bringing us from outside to the inside into a continuing presence. So again, there's not a whole lot there. This only partly makes sense. We haven't collected all of our information from this verse, though. And the next word to consider is be'eretz, which In the verse it says upon the earth, but literally it means in the earth. And it doesn't mean bottom hard. Okay, in our verse, for some reason it says bottom hard. There are no words for either of these two things in this little verse of Hebrew. Literally it says in the earth. So if we went back and we read that, it would say, now as I beheld the living creatures, behold one wheel in the earth, or in the earth by the living creatures. So it changes the meaning a little bit. This bottom hard thing, I don't know where they got that from. But the bait that's used here means in. But we've learned that bait as a letter and as a word also means house. It means tent, tabernacle. Eretz means earth, but it can also mean soil. And it's here that we could consider what seeds we plant and what we do in order for those seeds to sprout and eventually produce fruit. We have to take into account what Yahshua taught about the 3 different places where the seed can land. And if we take a quick look at that, it's Matthew 13, 3 through 9, where Yahshua is saying, and he said, and he spoke to them much in parables, saying, see, the sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some indeed fell by the wayside, and the birds came and devoured them. And others fell on the rocky places where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up, because they had no depth of soil. But when the sun was up, they were scorched, because they were not, they had no root, and they withered. And others fell amongst the thorns, and the thorns came, and they choked them. And others fell on good soil, and yielded a crop, and some 100-fold, and some 60, and some 30. And then he says, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. And then he goes on to explain it a little bit further. He says that there are some people that hear it that get all excited, but immediately somebody comes to them and they start to tell them, oh, that's a whole bunch of bunk, and they immediately discard it. Some people, it falls, they take it in, and it grows real quick, but they lose interest real fast, and it dies. Some people hear the word, and they take it, but there's so much information, and now in our information age, in our internet age, that you have the word, but there's all this garbage that starts to come into it, and then the word gets choked. It gets muddled and all confused, and that doesn't produce fruit. And then finally there's that falls on the good soil, and that takes root, and then you get a tree, and from that tree you get fruit. So this idea here for bait, if we say that in Bereshis, the earth in Bereshis 1:1 represents you and I, and that we're to be good soil in order to plant and grow, then we can see that this is a very important thing, because as we go on further into our study, we're gonna have to ask ourselves, what is being planted? Because one of the things we're going to discuss in this little graph thingy, if I can figure out how to do it as we go, I haven't done the graph thingy, is, okay, I've established in my life that Elohim prevails. Is that enough? Because a lot of people have established in their life, Elohim prevails, you know, God bless you, Jesus saves, and that's as far as it goes. There's no root, there's no relationship there. So anyway, so it is here that we could consider what seeds we plant and what we do in order for those seeds to sprout and eventually produce fruit. Its Proto-Hebrew is simply retz, which gives us an idea. There's the little head of the man as authority, and there's a person laying down on his side, that the authority of the side. And we say, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense, the authority of the side. But if we go back and consider Hine once again, and we take those letters in Hine, that we say that the He represents the Spirit of Yahweh, and it also represents our paying attention, that's on both sides of this letter Nun, that represents both life and the soul, then if we are paying attention to the authority of the Spirit of Yahweh Elohim on our right and on our left side, then the life of our soul will not stray to the right or to the left, and as such we will be led to the door in the wall that will bring us from the outside into the inside, where we are in the continual presence of Yahweh Elohim. So if we take this word for behold and we look at it from the meanings of the Hebrew letters within that word, then we understand, well, something that we've already concluded from what we've learned in the past, that Yahweh is all around us. The Spirit is all around us. It's up to us to perceive. But that it's on our right side and our left side is an important thing for us to grasp onto. We'll explain it when we get into the verses, because if we'll remember that Yechezeqel laid on his right side for a while, and then he got tired of laying, well, on his left side for 390 days, and he got wore out doing that, and he flipped over and laid on his right side for 40 days. So we're going to take a look at this here in a minute to kind of give us an idea a little bit further, but this concept will help us to later understand why Yechezeqel was to lie on his left side and his right side. But that's another study. We're going to touch on it, but we're not going to go a whole lot into depth in it. So this is brought into further light by the next word, which is etzel, that in this verse is simply used to say by. Now this is interesting that they went out of the way to actually write a word that says by. You don't see this a whole lot. Why did they put a word for by in this? The word etzel means to join something together. So if we consider what makes up the word etzel, then we see that we have an aleph that means Yahuwah. We have the zadi that means righteous. And then again we have the lamed that means instruction. So we could understand this to mean being joined by etzel, which is the word that is Torah, that is referred to as Yahshua. So again we see that this joining is to the living creatures minus the word creatures, as this word isn't in the Hebrew of this verse, which leaves us attached once more to life, only this time at the four faces thereof. Okay, so, well, we've managed to explain some of it, but now we have this other thing at the four faces thereof. So here we go with another thing that really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The word le'arba'at means at the four, and the last word of this verse is panav, meaning face. Now, from our last studies, we've looked at the word le'arba'at, that it illustrates the perception of the instruction and the authority of the covenant with the house of Yahweh. Now, it also means the letter four, ordinally. So if we say four is the dalet, then we can also say that it is the door. But perceiving the door or not is dependent on whether we are in a state of spiritual poverty where we can't see it, or whether that spiritual poverty has finally opened our eyes to where we do perceive the door. Okay? We also considered that the word arabah also indicates four squared, which led us to 16 as an ordinal number of kof. And in this we recognize that by accepting the covenant made possible by Yahshua, we are set apart to the house of Yahuwah under his authority and his instruction. This brings us into his presence. And this is panav, where we will abide continuously as long as we continue to believe and receive his Yahshua that was made possible by and through Yahshua. Everybody with me? Okay. So from this we can consider the following idea. Our life is attached by the righteous instruction of Yahuwah that brings us into his house and into a covenant relationship with him. We abide inside his house continuously as long as we continue to believe and receive his Yahshua that was made possible by and through Yahshua. That gives us an overall concept or overall idea of this verse, that if we are paying attention to the authority of the Spirit of Yahuwah, our Elohim, on our right and on our left side, then the life of our soul will not stray to the right or to the left, and as such we will be led to the door in the wall that will bring us from the outside into the inside, where we are in the continual presence of Yahuwah Elohim. Our life is attached by the righteous instruction of Yahuwah that brings us into his house and into a covenant relationship with him. We abide inside his house continuously as long as we continue to believe and receive his Yahshua that was made possible by and through Yahshua. So, in that we've come to understand that there's Yahshua as a concept, that the redemption, deliverance, and restoration that comes from Yahuwah is only possible by accepting Yahshua as the Son of Man, who as the vehicle of sacrifice shed his blood in order to restore the covenant between Elohim and Adam that brings us back into the house of Elohim, which brings us back into basically what is the garden, Gan, that we are again surrounded by his hedge of protection and are once again his delight. To me, yeah, okay, it made a little sense, but then again, it's kind of difficult to understand. But when I woke up from this little nap, I guess I was just tired. When I woke up, I realized something odd. That Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin, from Israel. David was from the tribe of Judah, from the kingdom of Judah. And then it kind of struck me as kind of being strange. So then I started to piece things together. And Bereshit 2:23, we've talked about it about a gazillion times. It said that Adam said that she shall be called Isha because she came from Ish. Now we said that the Spirit comes from our worship, it comes from our praise. And earlier we made a statement that Ish by itself without Isha is just as weak as Isha without Ish. Okay, we can praise and worship based on a false assumption that will give us basically what amounts to a false spiritual manifestation, so to speak. Everybody with me on that? Our worship has to be true in order for the Spirit to be true. And this hit me as I started looking at this. So I went to Samuel. Let me kind of rearrange things right quick. To Samuel, move this big old gizmo over. 9 verse 2, and it's 1 Samuel 9 verse 2. That says, and it's talking about, we take a look at one, is there was a guy named Kish, the son of Abiel, the son of Tabor, the son of Bakora, the son of blah, 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 a Benjaminite, a mighty man of power, and he had a son whose name was Shaul, or Saul, young and handsome, and there was not more handsome than he among the children of Israel, taller than any other people, and from the shoulders upward. Okay, so he was a handsome guy, he was a tall guy, and he was over here chasing donkeys around when Samuel found him and said, hey, there's an opening for the king of Israel, would you like the job? So we put this little verse over here, 1 Samuel 9:2, okay? He's handsome, he's tall. Does the external appearance, he's someone who's desired. Why is he desired? Because if we go back, we'll find out that the people said, we want a king. And it's something they desired. We don't want Elohim. And this is something that that Yahuwah told Samuel. He said, don't freak out, wig out, and space out. They're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. So go find them what they desire. Saul means desired. Okay? He was from Israel. He was a Benjaminite. He was handsome. He was tall. He was chasing donkeys. Okay? Donkey is a stubborn animal. All right, so let's go to the next verse here. It's 1 Samuel 13:13 that says, and Samuel said to Saul, you have been foolish. You have not guarded the command of Yahuwah Elohim, which he commanded you. For now Yahuwah would have established your reign over Israel forever. Then in 14 it says, but now your reign is not going to stand. Yahuwah shall seek for himself a man after his own heart, and Yahuwah shall command him to be a leader over his people, because you have not guarded what Yahuwah has commanded you to do. So this was a point that Saul kind of jumped the gun and did something that Elohim had not ordered him to do. So why did he do it? Because at this point, he's king. I'm Saul. I'm tall, I'm handsome, and I chase donkeys. But it was about himself. So put 1 Samuel 13:13 here. And then we go on to 1 Samuel 15:11. And I don't know why these verses particularly, but 15:11 that says, I am grieved that I have set Shaul up as sovereign. This is Elohim talking. For he has turned back from following me and has not performed my words. And it displeased Samuel, and he cried to Yahuwah all night. Okay? So Yahuwah has seen that just because he's tall and he's handsome doesn't necessarily mean that he's following according to the word of Elohim. So this is 1 Samuel 15:11. Now, we have kind of a run of things going on here. So Samuel 15, verse 20 is over here. And Shaul said to Samuel, I did obey the voice of Yahuwah, and I went on the way which Yahuwah sent me, and I brought back Agag, sovereign of Amalek, and I put Amalek under the ban. But the people took the spoil of the sheep and the cattle and the best that there was, which they'd been put under the ban to slaughter. What did Elohim tell him to do with the Amalekites? We remember our story. Elohim told Saul to utterly destroy them. Why did he not destroy Agag? His point of view over Elohim's point of view. Says, I am taking a trophy. And listen to what he says here. And Saul said to Samuel, I did obey the voice of Yahuwah, and I went on the way on which Yahuwah sent me, and brought back Agag, sovereign of Amalek, and I put Amalek under the ban. Did he do what Elohim told him to do? So he's making it up as he goes. And now he's going according to his point of view. So things start to go south now in verse 20 of 15. And we go now to verse 24, where things start to, well, I guess they're shaky. I don't know. Maybe y'all make me nervous. No. And Shaul said to Samuel, I have sinned, for I have transgressed the command of Yahuwah and your words, because I feared the people and listened to their voice. Now please pardon my sin, return with me, and let me bow myself to Yahuwah. What has he just done here? He has made teshuvah, or has he? He's repented. He simply stated, I have sinned, I have transgressed the command of Yahuwah, and your words, because I feared the people and listened to their voice. Okay? So we're not taking any responsibility here. It's because of the people, they made me do it. Okay? But now, listen to this. He's talking